Hi, welcome to the Brandon and Carlos Show. I am Brandon, and this is my co-host, Carlos.
Hey, everybody.
We have a thought-provoking show for you today. I must warn you, this show may cause you to think, cry, and it may even make you angry. We are going to be talking about the Netflix miniseries, When They See Us. According to the Internet Movie Database, When They See Us chronicles the true story of a notorious case of 5 black teenagers who were convicted of a rape they did not commit.
Yeah.
I have watched this 4-episode series. Watching this show caused me to cuss and even cry. I had to turn it off a few times to get myself together. This show reminded me of how it feels to be a black man in America. I really thought we were making progress, but this show reminded me of how far we have to go. The events that this Netflix mini docuseries speaks of happened in 1989, June to be exact. I was 8 years old. I don't remember it at all. I have no recollection of even my mother or my father talking about it. The first time of me hearing this story was on May the 31st of this year, 2019. What about you, Carlos?
Well, I was 6 at the time, and I vaguely remember the media coverage from this situation. And the thing that really stuck out to me after looking back on it was the Donald Trump interview. And I remember the reaction my grandfather had. He was angry. But with me being 6 years old, I didn't know the ins and outs of the case until, as you said, May 31st, when I was able to watch the miniseries.
To our listening audience, just in case you are unfamiliar with the events or the show that we are even talking about today, Carlos is going to catch you up to date.
This miniseries was called When They See Us. It was by Ava DuVernay. She was the director. And what it does is it chronicles the Central Park Five, which was, as Brandon said, a very notorious case back in 1989 that took place in New York City. What happened was a white woman, while jogging through Central Park at night, was raped and brutally raped. And there were a lot of African-American youth in the park. And because of the fact that she was a white lady who had been raped, they basically just put and tried to put together and just really just nastily put together and stuck the crime on the black youth that were in the park. And if you watch the documentary, you'll see that they weren't even near the lady. And they were unfairly arrested, unfairly, just the whole 9 yards. They were just treated really nastily by the system. And that's what it chronicles, what they went through and how it even happened and what they are doing and how they got free and how they were exonerated eventually some 12 years later.
Wikipedia says it like this. At 9 p.m. on the night of April the 19th, 1989, a group of more than 30 teenagers who lived in East Harlem entered Manhattan's Central Park at an entrance in Harlem near Central Park North. It says they committed several attacks, assaults, and robberies in the northernmost part of the park. At 1:30 that night, a white woman jogger was found in that park, pulled off the path and badly beaten. She was later revealed to have been raped. The New York Times later characterized the attack on the jogger as one of the most widely publicized crimes of the 1980s. I misspoke in our introduction. This happened in April 19th, April the 19th, 1989. I said June, I believe. I apologize.
I think that's when the trial took place.
Okay, got you. According to a police investigation, the main suspects were gangs of teenagers who would assault strangers as part of an activity that became known as wilding.
Wilding.
Like wilding out, you know.
Like wilding out.
I'm reading this straight from Wikipedia. New York City detectives said that the term was used by the suspects when describing their actions to the police. Speaking of the wilding, like wilding out. This account has been disputed by some journalists who say that it originated in a police detective's misunderstanding of the suspect's use of the phrase doing the wild thing. Lyrics from rapper Tone Locs.
Tone Loc.
Yeah, a hit song Wild Thing. Some of the 30 teenagers attacked and beat people as they moved south on the park's East Drive in the 97th Street Traverse between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. Within the North Woods, between 102nd and 105th, they attacked several bicyclists, hurled rocks at a cab, and attacked a pedestrian whom they robbed and left unconscious. A school teacher out for a run was severely beaten and kicked between 9:40 and 9:50. The head with a pipe and stick, knocking him briefly unconscious. A police testified he was bleeding so badly he looked like he was dunked in a bucket of blood. 5 suspects were later convicted on these charges. This is just talking about how during on this night, there were a bunch of young men that were out basically committing crimes. Nobody's saying that there were crimes not committed. What we are upset about is how they chose the people.
These 5 young men.
And really it was more than that. I was looking at an interview of, and we're going to call the 5 men's names, and at the time 5 boys' names in a minute, because I think their names need to be called. People need to be reminded of this story. But I was watching a video of where it was saying that there were really more than that, then it was 6. And then I think the 6th guy pled it out, but the other 5, they wouldn't take the charges. They went to court, and they ultimately lost. But the victim's name, and I apologize if I mispronounce her name, but it's Trisha Mealy.
That's a good.
Trisha Mealy. If I find myself pronouncing that wrong, I will correct it in one of our upcoming episodes, because this is definitely something we're going to be talking about more than just this episode. But Trisha was going for a regular run in Central Park shortly before 9 p.m. While jogging in the park, she was knocked down, dragged, or chased nearly 300 feet. Let me say this. I don't want anyone to think that we are being insensitive to Trisha Mealy, who was the victim in this notorious case. She definitely was treated horrifically. The words cannot compare to the brutality that was invoked upon this young woman at the time. I don't want to be insensitive to her or even her family. So I want to say that first and foremost about that. But her story goes on. She was raped and almost beaten to death. About 4 hours later at 1:30 a.m., she was found naked, gagged, and tied, and covered in mud and blood. Trisha was discovered in a shallow ravine in a wooded area of the park about 300 feet north of a path called the 102nd Street Crossing. And then the story goes on. I'm sure you all can, some of you are maybe like us, maybe haven't heard of this story until this Netflix came out, but it happened back in 1989. But Carlos, the young men, the boys at the time, would you call their name out for our listening audience.
Corey Wise, Raymond Santana, Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salam.
They were taken in to custody. Not necessarily all of them that night. I think 2 of those 5 names. We'll have to fact check that, and if you don't mind to do that, while I say this to our audience, these young men, these boys, were taken into custody for basically just being mischievous in the park. They were up to no good. They were. I mean, we all have been young, and we've all probably done some stuff we're not proud of. But they were taken in under the pretense that they were going to go to family court. That's the thing that they had in New York. Basically, you committed a misdemeanor up under age, and your parents had to come get you and take you to family court, and you would get it done and handled in the juvenile system. But the DA at the time, who was
the DA at the time.
Yeah, the person who prosecuted them.
Linda Fairstein.
Yeah, Elizabeth Fairstein. She got wind of it, or the DA's office got wind of, that, hey, these young men were there in the park when this rape happened. So they started to try to, but they was about to let the 2 boys go, and the DA's office is like, hey, keep them, detectives question them, what happened with this rape. And they started to question these boys, and none of them, at least as is portrayed in the movie, knew of a rape or even the woman that they were talking about. Matter of fact, only 2 knew each other. Right. I think that was Yusef Salam, and Corey Wise. And we'll talk about that here shortly. But they didn't even know each other. But the police, the detectives, they interrogated them, and I hope no one has to go through interrogation, but you think that you seen it on TV and that it's all cool, but when it happens to you in real life, it's very intense. Even for an adult, but take kids who, babies in my mind. My child, I have kids their age now, and I couldn't imagine them being questioned by detectives about something they even had nothing to do with.
Well, you have to understand, and to my understanding, yes, there were about 30 teens or more that were in the park, and they were up to no good. These particular 5, they weren't really a part of that gang. They were there. It was more so, I'm in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and I probably shouldn't be here, but I am because this is just a popular thing to do, and I'm watching things unfold. They really weren't a part of that really gang that was even doing that activity.
Okay.
But these were all teenagers. They were all 14, 15, and unfortunately for Corey Wise, he was 16, which I believe is the age of statutory for New York.
Meaning that he could
be tried as an adult.
But I thought I read somewhere that all of them, sorry to interrupt you, Carlos, but I thought I read somewhere where all of them were tried as an adult. Am I wrong in saying that?
I believe so. I think they tried to, because of the fact that there were some misunderstandings about their age and what was on their IDs. But once they had the proper ID and the proper understanding about their ages, right, they all understood that they were 14 and 15 years old, which means they could not be tried as adults. Right. Which is the reason why Corey Wise caught the worst end of everything.
Right. And you mentioned Corey Wise. Y'all, Corey Wise wasn't even a suspect
at all.
They were looking for Yusef Salam. And they finally, now Yusuf, he actually, his own testimony, he said that he was actually, he heard that the police was looking for him, and he was like, oh, why are they looking for me? I'm gonna go talk to them first, you know. Right. And they kept missing each other or something along the lines. And but anyway, they finally caught up with Yusuf, and they was like, yeah, we got your name on this list. And Korey Wise was there, and they asked him for his name, and he told them he wasn't on the list. And they was like, well, you want to come downtown too? You know? And so he was going down there like, you my homeboy. Like, if something happened to me, right, you come down there to have my back. And that's all he was doing, was going down there to have his back. And they ended up sticking it on him. And he ended up, in my opinion, having the worst turnout of all of this.
Oh, man, without a doubt.
You know.
Everybody else went to juvenile. He went to Rikers.
Wow.
He went to Rikers.
One of the worst prisons.
And went from Rikers to Sing Sing, which is
another
terrible prison. So, and in the miniseries, in the the miniseries, it documents the last 2 episodes really is Korey Wise's story about what he had to go through while he was in prison. Wow. He was beaten by the guards. He was taken advantage of at 16 years old. You know what goes on in prison. I don't even have to speak on that.
Right. It's truly horrific. They basically beat some of these children into confessing. They scared them into.
Basically, they beat them.
Yeah.
They beat them.
And
before we get too deep, I think what we ought to do is really tell what stuck out to us about the trial. We gave them a lot of background. What really stuck out to you, and what caused you to cry? What caused you to be angry, Brandon?
Because all they were guilty of, as it relates to this case, this rape case, this assault case, was being black. There was no DNA evidence. Mm-mm. They tested all of these boys, these young men.
Yes.
No DNA evidence. And they continued to push it on them. Everybody knows the police can't talk to a minor, interrogate them without parental consent, or they didn't have lawyers in there with. I mean, their rights was infringed upon.
Everything was illegal about this.
They were treated like animals and dogs. That for one had me angry, because I have 3 boys, and my 3 boys, I'm just sitting there. This can happen to them.
Yes.
So I have to talk in 2019 to my young boys. Be careful who you associate with. Be careful where you are. When you see the police, be this way. It's sad. That's one thing that ticked me off. And another thing, that Donald Trump, we haven't talked about that in detail yet, but he at the time he was just a civilian, you know. He's not in politics at all. You know, he has his companies, etc. He took out ads before the trial.
Yes. In
4 New York newspapers. Publications. Full-page ads.
Spent over $87,000 for this.
And in 1989, I mean, that's a lot of money now. But in 1989, that's like over some millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Just on ads. To basically say, we want the death penalty back just for these young black men. He even said that people are saying we shouldn't hate, but he even spoke and said that they should hate these boys because of what happened.
He said, I hate these people. Let's all hate these people. Maybe hate will get something done.
That's directly quoted from Donald Trump's mouth. And that ticked me off. And why did that tick me off? Because he says that, and that's how he felt at that time. And he still, to this day,
feels the same way.
feels the same way.
No apologies.
No apologies.
No, I was wrong. No, that nevertheless that the evidence has come out to state and came out during the case that these young men were in fact innocent. And then the person who Matias Reyes, who
tell them who Matias Reyes is.
Matias Reyes was the person who actually did the assaulting and the rape. And the crazy thing about that is he met Corey Wise in prison.
Right.
Not once, but twice.
Right.
And he asked Corey, he says, Corey, are you still not taking the rap for that? Are you still maintaining your innocence? And Corey told him, yeah, because I am innocent. And on the second time around, he eventually goes ahead and says, I'm the one that did it.
Right.
And then gives his confession. And it lines up, and the DNA lines up, and he was the one that did it. And they were finally exonerated in 2002 after they spent their formative years in prison. 13 years.
And the statute of limitation had passed. He could not be prosecuted for it. He was serving a life sentence anyway.
Right.
But he had a come to Jesus moment and was like, hey, I need to really get it straight. He met Wise while he was held at the Auburn Correctional Facility in upstate New York. In 2002, Ray said that on the night of April 19th, 1989, he had indeed assaulted and raped that jogger. He was 17 years old at the time. We're talking about Matias Reyes, and said that he had acted alone. Reyes was then working at an East Harlem convenience store on 3rd Avenue and 102nd and living in a van on the street. And then, I mean, it's just horrible, man. Matias Reyes was what they called the East Side rapist. That, I mean, that's he had raped so many people up there that he had his own little
he was a serial
title.
rapist.
Yeah, he was a serial rapist. He acted alone. Now, let me say this. It's not like Matias Reyes, the guy who actually committed the crime. It's not like he just confessed and it was done and over with.
Right.
He had to literally prove. See,
Yes.
most time you got to prove that you're innocent.
He had to prove that he was guilty.
He had to prove that he was
He had
guilty.
to give detailed, very, very, very detailed specifics of the crime
Right.
that he committed.
They committed.
And then, if you look at the interview that Oprah just did with the gentleman,
Yes.
they all felt that it wasn't even going to matter, that they were just going to somehow sweep it under the rug,
Right.
even if he did so, because the system doesn't care about black men.
Mm-hmm.
What they care about is their conviction rates.
Mm.
And it's obvious, because if you look at it, if you go back and look at the documentary, if you go back and look at the miniseries, if you just go back and look at the evidence, their lawyers did a great job of saying the DNA doesn't match.
None of them. No DNA.
No DNA matches. No blood. The kids were brought in within the next 2 days. There was no blood splatter on any of them.
With the clothes they had on that night.
Exactly.
Now let me interject. The gruesome, horrific rape that took place and all the blood
that was
shed. I mean, they showed the what the woman had on and how much blood was on there and how it had leaked onto the ground. Out of all that blood, no blood was on any of those young men.
None blood.
No. Okay, and watch this. The woman defended herself. Trisha, she tried to defend herself.
Yes.
And she grabbed some of the skin. None of the skin, their skin was up under their fingernails. They did all of this. I mean, they took DNA swabs. They took blood. They did
hair
samples. Nothing. Do y'all hear me?
Nothing.
Evidence lined up. But because they confessed, their confession trumped physical, scientific evidence. And many of you, maybe you might think that because someone confessed to a crime, that means they're guilty. I used to think that way. But I have since learned and matured beyond that you can convince folk to to admit to something that they didn't do. If you have the right environment, you put the right pressure on them. These boys wanted to go home, Carlos.
Yeah, they were.
That's all they wanted to
do. Sleep deprivation.
They wanted to go home.
They were hungry, and they were beaten into a confession.
And they were told that if they tell on each other, that they would go home. So they told on each other, but they didn't even know each other.
Right.
They fed them information. They didn't even know anything about the case.
Corey Wise couldn't even read.
So they fed them information. They wrote out a statement and had the boys sign it, except Yusuf Salim. His mama actually got wind that they was down there at the precinct, and she came and ended the interview, or let me not say interview, ended the interrogation, the torture. Can I call it that? Torture? Because they tortured these young men.
Yes, they did.
The way that they were tortured is, nowadays, it's illegal.
It was illegal then.
You know, they can't even torture people that way in war.
They weren't even supposed to be talking to these kids, let alone giving them some type of plea. And then, as I said before, sleep deprivation. They didn't eat. They're not even understanding why they are even in this position as a 14-year-old boy, 15-year-old boy. They don't even understand why they're here.
We're going to have another episode about this, but just so we can kind of bring this to an end, they ended up getting out. They sued the city of New York. They won won $41 million, which to the average person, you would think that's a lot of money. And it is, but it's not in my opinion, that's nothing can repay them for the time they spent in prison. I think some of the young men maybe even raped in prison. You know, and just for y'all that may be a little green, if I may use that expression, to the criminal justice system, you don't want to go to prison for two things. One, rape, and the second one, child molestation. Those two things will get you killed. They'll get you raped and everything in prison.
You don't want to go, period. But if you have to go, don't do those.
But if you go and you say you was a drug dealer, they treat you like a brother, you know, a star. You know, hey, you got busted on this drug charge. You know, nobody. It's like a form of respect. Robbing somebody, even breaking in someone's house and stealing cars, that's looked at as respect. But you get accused of rape and you go in there, they don't care about any evidence or anything. All they know is you in prison for rape, and they're going to get you. They're going to stab you. And, you know, if you watch the Netflix series, you'll see where Corey Wise was stabbed. And, I mean, it was just horrible. Yeah. But they ended up getting this $41 million each. Not each. In all. I'm sorry. In all. And I think Corey ended up getting the most because he spent the most time in prison. But that's nothing. That's nothing to the horrible time that they had to go through this. We're going to have some more episodes on this. We really want to use this as a springboard to have a heart-to-heart discussion about race relations in America, especially right now in 2019. I'm sorry, y'all, we got a racist president. I'm going to say that. A racist president, and I respect the office of President of the United States. I do. And I've tried my best to like Donald Trump. I tried, because I said maybe it's just the way he talks. But the more I hear him talk, the more and more I dislike him. I used to didn't think he was racist. I even made the comment and said that he's not racist. He just, you know, he's a rich man who he's a Republican. He's all about making money. But I mean, now I feel, especially after looking at this, I can't help but say he's racist.
But before we jump up out of here, because I really didn't get a chance to really share with you what really stuck out to me and really upset me. The title of the miniseries is really what caught my attention. When They See Us. What does that say? When they see us, what does that say to you? And I'm going to leave you with that thought because, again, we are going to have a second and possibly a third episode about this because this is a major situation that we are going through even now in 2019. We appreciate you listening. Catch you on the next episode.
Please don't forget to go to our Facebook page, leave your comments, like, share this with your family and friends because we need to have a conversation, America. We're not going to just see this from one side. We're going to have white guests on the show. I'm going to try to get some Hispanic guests on the show. I want to even get some gay and lesbian guests on the show. They know what it feels like to be discriminated against. We're going to have a talk about this. Until the next episode, thank you for all of your support. And the call to action is, what what does America see when they see black people?